It ends 29-24, but the final score barely scratches the surface of what actually happened on that field, because this was one of those games that tests your nerves, your faith, and everything you think you know about this Steelers team. For nearly 4 quarters, it felt like Pittsburgh was walking a tightrope. One mistake, one missed kick, one blown coverage, and the entire night could have collapsed. And it almost did. Chris Boswell missing a 37-yard field goal, a kick that by his own standards is usually automatic, suddenly reopened the door for Detroit late in the game. The Lions had life, momentum, and the ball, with a chance to march down the field and steal a win that would have completely changed the narrative of this season. Then, on the literal final play, chaos takes over. A controversial offensive pass interference call on Amon-Ra St. Brown as time expires seals it. No extra snap. No miracle ending for Detroit. Just stunned silence on one sideline and pure relief on the other. The Steelers survive, and with it, they lock in their 22nd straight non-losing season in Pittsburgh, another chapter in a run that simply refuses to die under Mike Tomlin. But if you're watching this as a Steelers fan, you know this game was never about a clean, comfortable win. Early on, the offense looked stuck in the mud again. Just like the week before, the rhythm wasn't there, the drive stalled, and the defense was asked to carry the load. And for most of the first half, they did. The Steelers' defense bent but didn't break, holding firm while the offense searched for answers. Then, right before halftime, everything changed in a single, unbelievable moment. Kenny Gainwell makes one of the most absurd plays you'll see all season. Interfered with, falling to the ground, he somehow secures the ball one-handed, keeps his balance just long enough, and has the awareness to get up and take it into the end zone. That touchdown ties the game at 10-10 and completely flips the emotional momentum. Instead of heading into halftime frustrated and trailing, the Steelers walk off with belief, energy, and a spark that carries into the second half. And coming out of the locker room, you could feel it immediately. The Steelers didn't just possess the ball in the third quarter, they owned it. 14 minutes of possession in a 15-minute quarter tells the story. Long, methodical drives, physical football, and a commitment to the run that wore Detroit down snap by snap. Jaylen Warren becomes the engine. Explosive runs, vision, power, and speed all showing up at once. 2 massive touchdown runs, both long enough to suck the air out of the stadium, and suddenly the Steelers are playing from in front. Warren finishes with 143 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, part of a dominant ground attack that piles up 230 rushing yards as a team. This wasn't supposed to happen against Detroit. This was supposed to be a game where the Steelers couldn't run, couldn't control the clock, and couldn't keep up. Instead, they flipped the script entirely. Kenny Gainwell continues to be a massive part of that story. Over 100 total yards again, 78 on the ground and 50 through the air, and that touchdown before halftime that ends up being a 4-point swing in a game decided by 5. His ability to run routes, catch the ball cleanly, and stay productive in all phases gives this offense an edge it hasn't always had. Watching him right now, it's hard to imagine this team without him going forward. This running back duo is not just productive, it's becoming the identity of the offense when it matters most. But this game wasn't without its scars. Injuries start to pile up, and that's something Steelers fans need to pay attention to. Brandon Echols leaves in the first half with a groin injury after playing strong football in the slot. Groin injuries are tricky, and the odds of him being ready next week feel slim. Jalen Ramsey finishes the game in the slot, with Chuck Clark likely sliding into a bigger role if this lingers. Then Calvin Austin 3 exits with a hamstring injury and doesn't return. That opens the door for Scotty Miller, who steps in and makes the most of his opportunity. 3 targets, 3 catches, 19 yards, and multiple key first downs in high-pressure situations. 4th down, 3rd and long, moments where you absolutely have to have it, and Miller delivers. He shows chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, stays reliable, and proves he can contribute when called upon. Even if Roman Wilson gets a helmet soon, Scotty Miller earned trust in this one. Defensively, this was a tale of 2 games. For 3 quarters, the Steelers were outstanding. The run defense completely shuts down Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, holding them to a combined 16 rushing yards. That's not a typo. 16. Jack Sawyer deserves real credit here. He may not be a flashy pass rusher, but he set the edge, made 5 tackles, recorded a tackle for loss, and hit the quarterback twice. He did exactly what was asked of him, allowing others around him to make plays. The pass rush got home, the coverage held up, and Detroit looked frustrated. Then the 4th quarter hits, and Jared Goff catches fire. Chump plays down the field, 3 passing touchdowns on the night, and suddenly the defense is on its heels. It wasn't pretty, and it's an area that still needs cleaning up, but when the moment came down to it, the Steelers got the stop they needed, even if it came with help from a penalty at the very end. And looming over all of this is the bigger picture. This win puts pressure squarely on Baltimore. The Steelers control their path. Another win puts the division within reach, possibly before they even take the field again, depending on what the Ravens do. Mike Tomlin deserves credit for that. 3 straight wins late in the season against teams most people counted them out against, and now the possibility of a home playoff game is very real. This team is far from perfect, but it's playing its best football at the right time, and it's finding ways to win when it matters most. So after watching everything that unfolded in this wild, nerve-shredding win, what do you think this game really says about the Steelers right now? And who stood out to you the most in this performance? The bigger question now is what this version of the Steelers actually is as they move deeper into the final stretch of the season, because games like this force you to reevaluate old assumptions. For weeks, the outside narrative has been that this team survives rather than dominates, that it wins only when the margins are thin and mistakes tilt in its favor. But when you break down this performance honestly, there's more substance here than people want to admit. Putting up 29 points, controlling the clock the way Pittsburgh did, and rushing for 230 yards against a Detroit team that expected to dictate terms is not an accident. That is a formula, and it's a formula that travels, especially when the weather turns and the games tighten up. The offense, once again, tells a story of growth within the game itself. The early struggles cannot be ignored. The scripted plays out of the gate still feel clunky, and the rhythm takes time to develop. That's something that has shown up in back-to-back weeks. But once the offense finds its footing, it becomes increasingly difficult to deal with. Aaron Rodgers settles in, starts hitting throws on 3rd and long, and keeps drives alive when the defense expects him to check the ball down. There weren't flashy stat lines that jump off the page in terms of touchdowns, but the efficiency matters. 27 completions on 41 attempts, no interceptions, and command of the offense when the game was swinging back and forth. That calm presence shows up in moments that don't always make the highlight reels. What really elevates this group, though, is the balance. When Jaylen Warren is ripping off explosive runs and Kenny Gainwell is punishing defenses both on the ground and through the air, it changes how teams have to defend Pittsburgh. Linebackers hesitate. Safeties creep up. That's when the passing lanes open, and suddenly 3rd and long isn't the death sentence it once felt like earlier in the season. Warren averaging over a first down per carry in this game isn't just a fun stat. It's a reflection of how physical and decisive he was. Every run felt like it carried intent. And when you combine that with Gainwell's versatility, this backfield becomes a real problem, not just a complementary piece. There's also something to be said about contributions from players who haven't had the spotlight all year. Scotty Miller is a perfect example. He stays ready, stays patient, and when injuries force him into meaningful snaps, he doesn't shrink. He moves the chains. He understands where to be. Those are the kinds of details that matter in December football. It's the same with Jack Sawyer on defense. He isn't asked to be a superstar. He's asked to be reliable, to set the edge, to allow others to hunt, and he does exactly that. When you hold Detroit's running backs to 16 combined rushing yards, that doesn't happen by accident or luck. That's discipline, assignment football, and physical execution. At the same time, the concerns are real, and Steelers fans are right to talk about them. The fourth quarter defense remains an issue. When teams open things up and go heavy into the passing game, Pittsburgh has struggled to close cleanly. Jared Goff throwing for 364 yards and 3 touchdowns is not something you gloss over. The lack of turnovers also stands out. This defense thrives when it takes the ball away, and that didn't happen here. They had to survive on pressure, timing, and one final moment that broke their way. Against elite quarterbacks in January, that margin gets thinner. Still, this is where context matters. This team is stacking wins against opponents many believed would expose them. First Baltimore, then Miami, now Detroit. 3 very different styles, 3 very different challenges, and yet the same result. The Steelers walk off the field with wins and growing confidence. They're doing it without perfect health, without dominating every quarter, but with resilience and adaptability. And that's why the division picture feels so significant right now. With Baltimore feeling the pressure and Pittsburgh controlling its own destiny, the idea of clinching the division before even stepping back on the field isn't far-fetched. That alone tells you how much this win mattered. Mike Tomlin's role in all of this can't be separated from the result. Non-losing seasons don't happen by chance, and while the standard in Pittsburgh will always be championships, this stretch shows why the locker room continues to believe. The team is responding late in the year. It's playing its best football when narratives say it shouldn't, and perhaps most importantly, it's starting to look like a group that understands exactly who it needs to be to win games, even if that version isn't always pretty. Now everything shifts forward. Cleveland looms. Health will be monitored closely. Adjustments will be made, especially on defense. But the foundation is there, and the confidence is real. This win wasn't just about escaping with a score. It was about proving, once again, that this team refuses to fold when the pressure spikes and the spotlight gets hot. If you've stayed with me through this breakdown, make sure you let your voice be heard. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share whether this game changed your confidence level in this team, and tell me where you stand heading into the next week. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for continued Steelers coverage, and keep an eye on the screen for what's coming next, because this season is far from finished. What makes this stretch so fascinating is how it's forcing everyone to recalibrate expectations in real time. For much of the season, the Steelers were talked about as a team with a limited ceiling, one that would eventually get exposed when the competition stiffened. Yet here they are, stacking wins against playoff-caliber opponents, doing it in different ways, and showing layers that weren't always visible earlier in the year. This wasn't a fluke performance fueled by turnovers or short fields. This was a game where Pittsburgh dictated pace for long stretches, leaned into its strengths, and absorbed punches without losing its identity. Look at how the Steelers managed the flow of this game once they found their footing. Time of possession wasn't just a stat, it was a weapon. Keeping Detroit's offense on the sideline for nearly an entire quarter wears down even the most explosive teams. That approach also protects a defense that, while aggressive and physical, has clearly shown signs of fatigue late in games. By committing to long drives and pounding the run, the Steelers didn't just score points, they controlled emotions, momentum, and energy levels on both sides of the ball. That's veteran football, and it reflects a team that understands situational awareness. There's also a psychological edge building with each of these wins. When you beat Baltimore, Miami, and Detroit in succession, you start to believe you belong in any conversation, regardless of what the national narrative says. Confidence grows in subtle ways. Offensive linemen fire off the ball a little faster. Running backs hit holes with more conviction. Receivers fight a bit harder through contact on third down. Defenders trust that if they give up a play, the offense can answer. That belief matters, especially when games swing wildly like this one did. At the same time, the Steelers are still very much a team in progress. The margin for error remains slim, and that's something no one inside the building is ignoring. The fourth quarter defensive lapses, the slow offensive starts, and the mounting injuries are all real concerns. Brandon Echols' potential absence impacts depth in the secondary. Calvin Austin III's hamstring situation could limit the vertical element of the offense. These are variables that will test the coaching staff's ability to adjust quickly. But what's encouraging is that when replacements have been called upon, they've responded. That speaks to preparation and culture more than raw talent. And that brings everything back to where this season is now headed. The Steelers are not chasing perfection. They're chasing positioning. They're chasing home field advantage. They're chasing an opportunity to play meaningful football deep into January. This win over Detroit didn't guarantee anything, but it strengthened their grip on control. It sent a message that this team can survive chaos, respond to adversity, and still execute when the game hangs by a thread. Now it becomes about sustaining it. Can the offense clean up the early game execution? Can the defense close games with more consistency? Can the health situation stabilize just enough to keep key contributors on the field? Those questions will define what comes next. But after what we just watched, it's hard to argue that this team doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. So now it's your turn. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me how you're feeling about the Steelers after this win, where your confidence level is right now, and what you think this team's ceiling truly is. If you want to keep following this run all the way through, make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button to support the channel, and stay locked in for the next video coming up on your screen. And as this story keeps unfolding, what stands out most is how the Steelers are redefining the way they win games late in the season. This is not a team relying on one superstar to bail them out every week. It's a team leaning on structure, depth, and moments of execution that add up over 60 minutes. Against Detroit, there was no single stretch where everything was perfect, but there were enough sequences where Pittsburgh imposed its will, and that's often the difference between teams that fade and teams that survive December football. You could feel that edge in the trenches as the game wore on. The offensive line, which has taken its share of criticism throughout the year, quietly delivered when it mattered most. Those long touchdown runs by Jaylen Warren don't happen without clean lanes, timing, and coordination up front. In the third quarter especially, Detroit knew what was coming and still couldn't stop it. That sends a message not just to the opponent, but to the locker room itself. When you can run the ball even when everyone in the stadium expects it, you control the game on your terms. That physical identity is also what allowed the Steelers to withstand the fourth quarter surge from Jared Goff. Yes, the defense gave up yards and points, and yes, it was uncomfortable to watch. But the earlier dominance against the run forced Detroit to become one-dimensional. When a team has to throw to come back, the pressure swings back the other way. One mistake, one penalty, one disrupted route, and the comeback dies. That's exactly what happened on the final play. It wasn't clean, it wasn't pretty, but it was decisive. And in this league, decisive moments are what separate wins from losses. There's also an emotional component to this win that shouldn't be overlooked. Coming off a missed field goal, with momentum slipping and the crowd sensing a collapse, the Steelers didn't unravel. They didn't panic. They trusted the process that had gotten them there. That composure, especially from a team that has been questioned all year, is a sign of maturity. It's the kind of thing that doesn't show up in box scores but becomes invaluable when games tighten up late in the season. What's building right now feels like belief mixed with urgency. No one in that locker room is celebrating a non-losing season as an end goal. It's a milestone, yes, but it's not the standard. The standard is relevance in January, and this team is putting itself in position to have exactly that. With each win, the pressure shifts outward. Opponents know they can't sleepwalk into games against Pittsburgh. Analysts are being forced to revisit earlier assumptions, and fans are starting to ask a different kind of question, not just whether this team can compete, but how dangerous it might be if it keeps trending in this direction. That's what makes this moment so compelling. You don't know exactly where it ends, but you know it's not done yet. There are flaws to fix, adjustments to make, and challenges ahead, but there is also momentum, confidence, and a clear identity forming at the right time. This win against Detroit wasn't just another notch in the standings. It was another piece of evidence that this Steelers team is far more resilient and capable than it's been given credit for. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me whether this game changed how you view the Steelers, what concerns still linger for you, and how far you realistically think this team can go. If you're enjoying this breakdown and want to stay with this journey,